We've been hearing so much about voting rights and voting rights legislation throughout the country. Well, we have a leader in voting rights legislation and actually in civil rights as well, and our own Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson. Stay tuned. You don't want to miss this program. We are so fortunate to have the Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson, who is not only known throughout the state of Michigan, but throughout the nation. I mean, we're the 43rd Secretary of State for the state of Michigan. And not so recently anymore, wrote a book about state secretaries of state, the guardians of the democratic process. And actually was the first major book on the role of the Secretary of State in enforcing election and campaign finance laws. And how timely is that? I mean, wow. When you became or thought about becoming Secretary of State, did you ever have any idea at all that you would have this kind of visibility on these types of issues? Talk to us about the journey a little bit.
Well, I've always seen the Secretary of State role as a really critical one for democracy. You're the state's chief election officer, and the decisions you make every day can impact access and security of the process. And we really saw that, I think, for the first time as a country in the 2000 election, when you had a Secretary of State in Florida, Katherine Harris, who didn't allow a full recount to happen, and that impacted an entire presidential election. So I wrote a book about the office, as you mentioned, in 2008 to tell the story of how important these offices are, because voters choose who you want to run your elections, and you have an opportunity to ensure that person is working for you and not for a particular party or a partisan interest. And as someone who, I started my career in Montgomery, Alabama, investigating hate groups and hate crimes throughout the country. And it was really there where I was instilled with a deep sense of commitment to continue the work of those who've come before us to make democracy accessible for all. And first I became a lawyer because I thought that was the best way I could protect democracy, but started to see the role of actually administering democracy as key to making sure that we have people on both sides of the aisle who are committed to democracy. And so never anticipated that it would be in such a critical juncture for the future of our democracy today. But I'm very proud to be, I feel in some ways I've been training for this the past 2 decades, for this role, to be able to stand firm in support of every voter's voice and ability to hold their elected officials accountable and protect our democracy today.
And when you were doing your work in Alabama, I know you're a civil rights expert almost in civil rights, and also a Harvard Law School graduate. So you have been entrenched in this work long before 2022 and long before how many states now are protesting the voters' rights? What number are we up to now in terms of legislation that's out there to make it harder and less secure for people to vote? How many states are involved with this work now?
We've seen 17 states pass over 30 pieces of legislation in the past several months, all of which will make it more difficult for us to ensure people can vote in the future. And it's all done really in furtherance or in response to misinformation, to lies that folks have been told by failed candidates for office who are unhappy that they lost elections. And it's unfortunate because as a data person, I think we as election officials and as lawmakers, we should be making decisions based on what the data tells us is in the best interest of our citizens. And we don't see that happening. We see partisanship and partisan rancor happening much more than real problem solving in general and when it comes to protecting our democracy. So we're at a challenging time, but it's one that we can emerge out of if citizens demand more and better from our elected officials.
And it's good to hear that level of optimism, because so many times, with AARP, we work with older adults primarily, and they are a very important voting bloc for any elected official. But so many times people are always looking to others to fix this problem. So talk with us a little bit about what people who are listening to this program, what folks can do to change the trajectory of all this nonsense in terms of the voter, asking for a driver's license or the last 4 of the Social Security on an absentee ballot, not allowing secretaries of states to mail absentee ballots, which this last election was one of the most secure. How many audits did you go through? Most secure elections ever. So, we are the people. So talk with us a little bit about what we can do and how we should as the young folks would say, stay woke right now, right? Pay attention.
Well, one of the most important things to just really know deep down is that right now democracy is in peril. But throughout history, the only thing that has ever saved democracy is citizens demanding that it work for them. And so citizens have a critical, if not the most critical role to play right now in being informed, engaged, and demanding that those who you send to Lansing, to Washington to work for you, protect your ability to access your democracy and ultimately hold them accountable. So that said, there's a lot of very important ways in which our older citizens our wiser citizens can play a role in talking about those things. And one example is, in 2020, 3.3 million of the 5.5 million citizens who voted from home or voted absentee. That was 3 times the number of people who'd voted absentee in the last presidential election. So that means a lot of people are voting absentee for the first time, but many AARP members have been voting absentee for years. And so at a time like this, when suddenly lawmakers want to make it more difficult for you to get your absentee ballot sent to you and more difficult for you to return it to make sure it's counted by adding additional barriers and protocols and hoops to jump through, that's where you can speak up and say, look, I've been voting absentee for decades, for this many elections. And there's never been a problem until now, because too many people, I guess, are voting absentee and people want to change that. And it's leading to higher turnout. People are reacting to that. And so to tell your story as voters and to tell your story about how the way you choose to vote, the option in which you choose to have your voice be heard is important to preserve. It's your right under our state constitution to be able to vote absentee. We have to fight for that. And I can think of no other group of citizens right now, other than members of the AARP, that have such an important role to play in just telling your story about how you voted in the past, how you vote now, and really demanding that the politicians don't make it more difficult for you to do so.
Well, we appreciate you being on the show, because we're going to be sharing that message as widely as we possibly can, as broadly as we possibly can, to let people know. I mean, there's a petition drive out now, Secure My Vote, to try to get a ballot proposal, try to get some language changed. I'm not certain that everyone completely understands what that means and the ramifications of that for how they vote, not just in terms of the issues that we're surfacing, but just voter, like social security number, driver's license, but just a multitude of other areas as well. Speak to that, if you would, Secretary Benson, a little bit about what this petition means. If someone signs it, if it goes through, if it becomes law, what does it mean for the voter?
I'm concerned that if this petition, which among other things would require you to write your numbers of your driver's license or your social security number on the envelope that you use to send in your ballot or your request form, that is opening you up to identity fraud for no reason. There's no reason. There's no security reason why you should be required to reveal those identity pieces on the envelope to which you're mailing to your clerk. It's never been needed before. Our elections have always been secure. It's only trying to deter you from voting absentee and require citizens to vote in person, which then creates longer lines and a greater stress on election day and limits your choices for casting your fundamental right to vote. So, recognizing the details of this particular proposal, which isn't being talked about as a way of getting, majority bipartisan support for. No, they're taking a very smaller route of just gathering 4% of the voting age population signatures and then using that and the loophole in our state constitution to adopt that into law, which I think really underscores how unpopular these measures really would be across the board if adopted. So that said, encouraging people to not sign these petitions and encouraging people to instead read the details and understand that the goal here with this petition is really to make it more difficult and complicated to vote and make it easier for officials after the fact to invalidate valid votes simply because they don't like the way an election turned out. And that's really, at the heart of who we are as a country. If this succeeds, it will really dismantle our democracy in Michigan from within. But there's something we can do about it now, and that's calling on our lawmakers to not support it, And the procedure is that they're collecting signatures for this petition, and then it's presented to the legislature. The legislature then needs to vote to adopt it into law. If they do that, then it doesn't need a governor's signature. But, lawmakers listen to you. And if you demand your lawmakers on either side of the aisle do not adopt this very anti-democratic, pernicious proposal, my hope is they'll listen to you and do what's best for their voters, not for their party.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what democracy is all about, right? And you mentioned 4%. I mean, that is such a ridiculous number of people to be able to change the law. Are there any plans to look at that later on after we get through this one hurdle? Any plans to look at that? Because 3.4% or whatever the number is of the voting population, to be able to change that and not have any veto power, not hearing from the voice of the people, doesn't seem like it's really serving democracy very well.
No, and I think like everything, you have to recognize we're beholden to a set of principles in our constitutions that determine our democracy and how it should work. And with the changing times and evolution of things, it's important for us to re-examine particular roles that have evolved in such a way to really be anti-American, anti-democratic, anti-what's best for our citizens. And this is one of them, allowing a small group of people to manipulate a process to change the way that everyone else votes, and in a way that will make it more difficult and complicated for all of those other folks to participate. So it's a really unfortunate decision that that these activists have taken to try to dismantle our democracy. But it is we've learned anything throughout history is the battle to protect our democracy never ends. It's ongoing, and so the most important thing we can do is hold people accountable in 22 and in 24. Those who have tried, whether they've succeeded or failed, to dismantle democracy can be held accountable at the ballot box. So many folks are doing this. So many lawmakers, politicians are bringing these proposals forward to try to gain celebrity, popularity, political power. And if they lose that by being rejected at the polls, which is, as citizens, one of our most powerful tools of holding people accountable, then perhaps we can emerge out of this moment with our democracy intact.
Well, again, we appreciate you and appreciate you fighting this battle. I know that you was the youngest dean in the history of Wayne State University Law School. You mentioned you in Alabama. This is part of your DNA. This is not just a job for you. It's a purpose and a passion, and you're driven by this. Writing the book in 2008, and when you mentioned putting the driver's license number and/or the last four digits of the Social Security number on an envelope.
Mm-hmm.
At AARP, we say we have been teaching for 60 years, don't give out your Social Security number, don't give out your driver's license number. We actually contract with an ambassador who tells you 55 ways that people can steal your identity. Number one, theft is identity theft. Now they're asking them to put it on an envelope. It's insane. It's absolutely insane. So I don't understand. I know it's politics, and I'm getting excited because this is not only professional, but it's personal for me as well. Voting rights, here we are in 2022, still talking about access to the polls and people trying to limit that. So talk about the security of the election. I mean, it's the the signature on the ballot and matching those signatures. What would it mean for the database if I put my Social Security number on an envelope? Someone's got to check that. I mean, it's crazy.
Well, it means a lot of people may choose not to vote absentee or be afraid or concerned to vote at all. And for some people, that means they can't vote if they feel uncomfortable voting absentee. It's kind of part of an effort, a really pernicious effort, to make people, deter people from participating in our democracy by creating more loopholes, more hoops for people to jump through, and more risks as well for you to take in order to cast your fundamental right to vote. And I think what we've seen as well already, though, is the really power of the AARP and the membership to stop these types of things from happening, these decisions that are being made that will uniquely affect your membership, the community, that will make it more difficult, more complicated to vote when you're used to voting a certain way for so long, and open you up to risks there's no reason to open you up to those risks. And so really communicating that to lawmakers, I think, and we've already seen this, that a lot of state senators stepped back from some of these provisions and are hesitant to support them now with recognizing the negative impact they would have on the AARP community. And so, making sure you're communicating that, I think, is we're probably one of the more, if not most powerful voices that can really protect democracy for all right now. As the group of citizens in our state have been voting absentee the longest. And when there's this attack really on absentee voting in our state, who better than to lead the response and the protection of it than our citizens who have been securely and effectively and conveniently and efficiently voting absentee for so long.
And we appreciate that. And yes, and we are standing side by side with anyone who wants to see the petition drive defeated, billboards, landing page, testimony, op-ed letters. So for those of you who are listening and you want to get engaged, you want to get involved with this, please just go to the website at the bottom of the screen here and get in touch with us, because this isn't we're nonpartisan. And I know you understand that very well. And we don't have a PAC, we don't give money or any of that. We're just a nonpartisan solely looking at what's in the best interest of those that we serve, which are older adults. And this is not in your best interest, ladies and gentlemen. There's nothing about this legislation that is or this petition drive that's in your best interest. And so whatever people can do, and Secretary Benson, again, I just, we've fought so many battles before in terms of absentee and working together. So we look forward, not because you are the Democratic Secretary of State, but because you're standing on the side of what's best for the people of the state of Michigan, which is what you've done all along since we've been talking about this and since you've been in office. So in the 3 minutes or so that we have left, tell us again, what's 3 things that someone could do right now that would really make a difference? Because it's very easy to get 340,000 signatures. That's easy. So once again, I know you shared it, but once again, 2 or 3 things that people can do.
Well, I think first and foremost, know that your story, your voices are for the most powerful tools, not just that you have, but that we all have for stopping this pernicious attack from happening, and just telling the truth to people about what really happens when you vote absentee and why our current procedures are indeed secure and accessible and convenient and efficient. So finding ways to tell that story in your community and different influence groups to make sure people just believe in the process of absentee voting, because they've been fed so many lies about it being not secure or not effective, or that their vote not counting, when you in fact know that it does. Secondly, certainly contact your lawmakers who will probably in the next few months receive a petition with these signatures to ask them to make all of these changes to how people vote absentee in the guise of creating secure elections, but really in just making it more complicated to vote absentee for our citizens. So letting your lawmakers know that you don't want them to support this is important. And then thirdly, talking during the signature gathering process, which is happening right now, talking to people about it and making sure they know what they're signing, because many people are being misled about this initiative, being told it's one thing when it's actually something that will take away many of the rights our citizens have to hold our elected officials accountable. And I think finally, it's important to note that none of this is partisan. We're not fighting for one group of voters or one particular perspective held by voters. We just want everyone to be able to vote equally, freely, conveniently, and securely. That's it. And those who are trying to stop that have different agendas in place, but our agenda is simply just making democracy work for all. And so I think keeping that in mind, because sometimes we hesitate to get involved in something that's political or partisan. None of this is either of those things. This is just about who we are as a country, as a state, as citizens, and our responsibility as American citizens, as Michiganders, to stand up and defend our democracy and defend everyone's right to vote so that we all can make sure our government works better for all of us.
Very well said. There's nothing, I can drop the mic now. That's all we need. Very well said. Thank you so much. And the journey continues, and we look forward to working with you throughout this process. And
likewise.
Yes, I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your leadership, and onward we go.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Take care. I appreciate you. Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.
Hello, my name is Dr. Amy Tren. I'm here with Dr. Joshua June from Great Lakes Center of Rheumatology. So today, I'm going to ask Dr. June some questions. I've noticed that in my practice, some patients are telling me that they're avoiding going outside, and they are making an exception to come to our appointments, but they also don't want to go to some other doctor's appointments. What do you feel is the impact of that?
I think that for good reason, people are afraid of COVID and afraid of getting sick. And a lot of ingenious methods have been used, such as using telehealth and online shopping, and basically keeping at home as best they can has helped people to avoid large crowds and keep themselves safe. But I think it's extremely important to maintain your relationship with your primary care and specialist so that you get routine checks, your blood pressure is under control, your blood sugars are under control, your routine bodily maintenance, so to speak, colonoscopies, to make sure that you're protecting yourself with preventative health care. This is more important for your long-term health goals than necessarily just staying at home or avoiding these necessary visits to your physician. So my recommendation is protect yourself by getting the vaccine if it's right for you. Wear a mask when you go out, and make sure that your doctor's office, which they should be wearing a mask and cleaning all surfaces as well. This has already been shown to be a very unlikely place to contract COVID or other diseases. So my recommendation is that they continue maintaining their health as they would have before COVID.
Hi, Craig. I've got lots of questions again for you. Gold, silver, people are investing in precious metals and gold and silver versus, and as a long-term investment strategy, talk with us about how important or whether or not that's a viable investment strategy.
Well, commodities typically are, and usually people only think of, or when you talk about the term of commodities, they think of gold, they think of silver, and sometimes they don't realize that wheat, corn, many food produce also is considered a commodity that you can buy contracts for and whatnot. But typically incorporating that into a portfolio, I always make sure that the client understands fully what they're getting involved in. Now, the buying of gold and silver, in many circumstances, people are looking at it from an inflationary hedge or protection. Mm-hmm. And one thing I thought was rather interesting was how is it that gold in and of itself is actually tied to an inflationary period? Mm-hmm. It actually started back during the oil embargo, to where when we had that oil embargo going on, the fuel prices were going through the roof. Now, in order to transport product from one area to the next, it had to be transported by truck, which was utilizing a lot of fuel. And of course, with the fuel prices going up, obviously increased the cost for everything that it transported. Exactly. So during that same time period, the dollar was separated from gold as being basically the staple currency. And then people were able to buy gold and hold it themselves in the mid to late 70s. So at that point in time, gold, I want to say, went from $35 an ounce up to $535 an ounce. At the same time that oil was going high. So it naturally got tied to that hedge. But if you take a look at the actual value of gold and how that's increased over time, it didn't even keep up with the rate of inflation. So even though it's used as an inflationary hedge, it hasn't really kept pace with the rate of inflation. So when we start to look at, well, what do we do to keep clients ahead of an inflationary pinch that we're currently experiencing in some form or another? If price of their normal lifestyle goes up, what strategies do we actually need to
That's a good question.
implement in order for them to keep pace with that?
That's a great question. Yeah, that's something that people need to consider, and I just strongly suggest they contact a financial advisor if they're looking at making this kinds of purchases.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Craig.
Thank you.
Amy, good to see you again. How do you begin a conversation with a loved one about their finances, about their passcodes, to perhaps help with the transition that you know will be coming?
Oh, that's a great question. There are so many people that they keep to themselves. They want, they're going to protect their livelihood, and they're going to protect, and they certainly don't want anybody in their business. Right. So it is a difficult conversation because it's coming and nobody wants to talk about it. It's the elephant in the room, especially if you have someone with an Alzheimer's or a dementia diagnosis. That is, it's going to happen. So you need to have the conversation as early as possible. Have your durable power of attorney signed, ready to go. So in the event that loved one would become incapacitated, someone would be able to make the decisions. As far as just be real with them. Don't try and, sugarcoat it. Just, we need to have this discussion. I need to know where the documents are. I need to know, where is the insurance policies? Where are all of the power of attorney papers? Anything like that? Veterans discharge papers, all of those things, because it's really hard for families to come at the end when it's been a health crisis and they're trying to find all of this information and it's next to impossible. So you want to make sure that those things are done ahead of time, especially before you go into a hospital or a rehab situation.
Absolutely. So don't be afraid to have that conversation and just establish trust so that they know exactly why you're asking.
Exactly.
Great advice. Great advice. Thank you so much, Amy.
Yeah.
If you are a female over the age of 65 or a male over the age of 70, if you have rheumatoid arthritis, ankylosing spondylitis, hyperparathyroidism, or hyperthyroidism, or if you take oral steroids, inhaled steroids, acid reflux medications, or anti-seizure medications, you might be at risk for low bone density or thin bones, a condition called osteoporosis. In order to find out your risk, you should get a bone density scan. What is a bone density scan? It's a low-dose X-ray that is used to tell us how thick or thin your bones are. This is radiation, and it sounds risky. However, to put in perspective, every day you are exposed to natural radiation, whether that comes from soil, plants, or even the food that you eat. A bone density scan equates to 1 day worth of radiation. X-rays can range anywhere from 3 to 5 days or 10 days of radiation. CT scans can go anywhere from 2 to 5 years worth of natural radiation. So a bone density scan is worth only about 1 day. So it's very safe, it's low risk, and for the information that it tells us, it's actually very worthwhile. In the event that you get the bone density scan and it comes back showing low bone density or osteopenia or osteoporosis even, there are management plans that you can discuss with your physician. First things first is prevention. You should take a vitamin D supplement. Exercises will be recommended. Weight bearing, such as walking. Muscle strengthening exercises will also be recommended, including using elastic bands for low impact exercise. Exercises that improve your coordination and your balance to help you prevent falls will also be recommended, including yoga, Tai Chi, and Pilates. If your bone density is very low and you're in the osteoporotic range and you're said to have osteoporosis, medications will be recommended, and they come in a very big variety, whether they're oral, injections, or infusions. And some of them can be administered anywhere from a daily, monthly, or even yearly. It depends on your medical conditions. It depends on your preferences. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Make sure you talk to your doctor about your risks for low bone mass and whether you need a bone density scan or not.
Thank you so much for watching the program today. This is probably one of the most important programs that Real Possibilities has aired, and we encourage you to please get involved. You see the website at the bottom of the screen. We want you to vote. We don't care who you vote for. We just want you to vote safely and securely. So please go to the website, get engaged, contact your legislator. You've heard democracy is on the line here. Your right to vote is on the line here, and voting securely and safely and not using your driver's license, not using your social security number. It just makes sense. All right. So please look at the website, get involved, and thank you so much for watching Real Possibilities.